So for a long time, I just did my own work. Or I partnered with somebody or something like that, you know. And so when I did the Far Side of 50, at the beginning, I started making the same mistake again. I put together this group of like 4 people, and it was the same damn thing. And I thought, oh my God, years have passed, decades have passed, and I haven't learned anything. And I don't want to direct, and I don't want to produce, but if I don't take this over, I'm going to drop the whole idea. And I don't want to do that. And I'm not saying that I'm the only one who's taking it over, but somebody had to take it over. And then since it was my idea originally, it seemed to me, you know, that I was going to have to do it. And then I brought in lots of help. I brought in everybody who knew how to do things and help put it together. And the reason I stopped doing it was because I couldn't find anybody to take it over and take it out of my hands and do the things that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do the marketing. I'm not good at it, you know, and I don't enjoy it. But I know how to do that too. So I know how to pull together a group that you could get a big group. Because here's the other thing I believe. I believe that if you're going to put on a performance, it takes the same energy to put it on for an audience of 30 as it does for an audience of 300. Well, I don't know, not 30,000. Although remember that today you could be doing it, you know, on something where people, not everybody is there. Not everybody is there. On the other hand, I do believe there's something different about a personal experience of theater. Okay? I believe there's something really terrific about being there and being the one to stand up and be. You know, one of the things I'm doing is the Coming of Age Film Festival. I watch enormous amounts of numbers of movies. I can't imagine how many movies I watch. And not just because of that. I mean, I watch movies. I don't even remember what I saw last week. But, you know, there's something about putting people together in a room. And what we did when we did this show the last time, we also had interaction afterwards. Always there was coffee and something to eat afterwards so people could come up and talk to their favorite people. And there was, before that, there was an interaction with audience. So that people could raise their hands in the audience and ask questions and make comments, and we could hear them.
What's your one do? Aesthetics?
Let's go to that. So I want to look at this. This look, you know what you did on the website is on your own website.
What is that mapping thing or on my website?
Yeah, I mean the little way you do that.
Mathematical poetry. Now, before you look at this, let's just talk about mapping something on a line, one dimension. Okay, so if we have an idea at one end, an idea. You remember a number line at school, grade school, where you had 0 in the middle, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on one side, -1, -2, -3. Long time ago. This is when you were about 5 or 6. But you had a gradation of value along the line. That makes sense. Start with 0 in the middle, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One side -1, -2. So you have a gradation of value. We can have with concepts in space. You can say probable, improbable, and a whole gradation between the idea of probable and improbable. Something right in the middle is both probable and improbable. It was right in the middle along that line. Does that make any sense? Let's just talk about, mapping online. It's like, you remember the game Hot and Cold? Hot and cold. If I got the wall here, if I get farther away, I'm getting colder, right? If I get closer to it, I'm getting hotter. So there's a whole gradation of heat and cold, right? But you can map metaphorically any idea on that. I'm getting
But
closer
the
to probable.
probable improbable is a function of the time you're living in also. Like the world is flat. The earth is the center.
It's all relative. Sure. Everything's relative. In my world, except experience, but that's kind of. But, so, let's think about what these are axes. And they all function just like that. But if I've got a wall that's hot and cold and I've got another wall that's sweet and sour, I can move over here toward the sweet side. Now I'm so hot and so sweet. My location physically in space defines an idea about how sweet or sour I am, and so how hot and cold I am. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're mapping. I'm mapping an idea of how hot and cold I am, and how sweet and sour I am. Two concepts mapped two-dimensionally in a space. Okay. And we can do a third dimension as well. I can go up and down and say how tired I am, how awake I am. I'm so tired or I'm so awake. So now I can move over here and I'm a lot more sour, a lot more cold, and a lot more awake. So I have three concepts. So I'm mapping an idea in space. Okay? So this is the same way we have it. But this system is basically to separate art and science. That's the whole purpose of this system.
Why?
To give you clarity about what they are. What is art?
But why would you want to separate?
So that you have an understanding of it. I think maybe that's a scientific sort of thing. Or an understanding of it in terms of why do you want to go to the grocery store? Why do you want to learn how to write a play? Why do you want to learn anything? That's it. Why do you want to learn anything?
Why do I want to learn?
Why do you want to learn anything?
Well, at this stage of my life, particularly, because I want a new experience that I think will be fun and interesting.
Yeah, see, this is the difference between the scientific mind and the artistic mind. Is what's fun. To a scientist, this is what's fun.
Okay. See, that's a problem that I have here. Because as soon as you said, let me talk to you about mapping. Okay. I want you to show me. I want to see the map. I don't want to talk about the map. I don't want to do this intellectually. I want
That's
to
why I
feel
was
it.
moving around.
Yeah, I like that. But then the separation is an interesting. See, I mean, I do know some scientists, and actually a few physicists, and the truth is it's very hard for them to be around me and others. Because we're not on the same, we really aren't on the same planet. I know it's very happy when you meet some people, this one guy that I'm particularly, when you meet some people actually think in the same way he does. He said he has to pretend to be interested in the way the rest of us. Including my question is, why is it necessary to make separations in order to learn?
Because you have to come up with definitions to communicate. You can't communicate. You can have an experience, but you can't communicate without making separations, defining things.
I mean, to me, this looks like a very interesting idea, but I'm looking at the words. Aesthetics of utilitarian function. Expression requiring physical. I mean, it's just, it's very hard for me to envision making a performance out of this. I mean, I could envision making a performance out of it, but not that I could envision my making a performance. I mean,
The first idea was to create small performances that illustrate
Different areas of this space.
Perhaps the streets make it easier. And then you wonder if they're very.
see, and I like the look of it, because that's the way I felt about your stuff. I think on your website, I never looked at the part where you have a theoretical explanation of what it's all about.
Yeah.
Does you want to know why? Why?
Because that's not,
Because I don't care.
right, that's not art,
And
that's
you know,
science.
it's the same thing about the computer. This is why I have a lot of computers. Thank God I have a husband who's an engineer. I don't care how it works. I just want it to work. I just want it to work.
No, I think that's very important.
And there's an awful lot of people like that. You know what I mean? I want, this could be, okay, this could be the underlying thing behind what you ultimately do. But to me, and even I like looking at this without even knowing what it is. Do you understand? I like the way this looks. There's an idea here. I like the look of that. I think that's interesting. But
Are you understand the ideas behind it? And
Well,
what
we
you-
haven't
what-
even
you
discussed
haven't even
about it.
discussed
what
the
you can-
ideas.
And what you can use, what you can use it for.
Well, and you can't
I agree.
imagine what it's used for until we discuss what the ideas are. So let's look at
this.
Let's look at these axes, and it's a lot easier here. This is really a reference
well, I
card.
like that moves and it's
Right, it is. And that's what
That's
this.
aesthetic. That's an aesthetic experience. Okay, even if I don't understand what it is, I can appreciate it. You know, I was into Dylan. Do I know what sad, hard, maybe a bit lowlands means? It meant something to me here. You know, you talked about under things synesthesia or, you know, different ideas. Oh, some kind of anesthesia. Anesthesia.
But that's important for writing.
But you know what? To feel something, to get something, it's a different kind of understanding. It is not only of the mind.
Well, that's just aesthetic subjective.
No, it-
And that's aesthetic.
Aesthetic
Right.
subjective.
And that's aesthetic. And it could be ugly, but I could like it. And it could be,
Yeah, you raise a very good point, because we're not judging this. We're simply categorizing.
Yeah, this is about category, not about value. We're not going to say, oh, this is better art, this is other art, but that's way too difficult.
no, I'm not even talking about that.
We're talking about, we're
No, I'm not even talking about
categorizing it as something.
So let's get to the matter. The idea of the aesthetic of direct sensory experience. The aesthetic aspect of beauty instantly with little to no effort thinking about what it expresses. This is what you were talking about.
Although there's a personal, you know, there are people who don't like the things that I really think are beautiful.
Of course.
A lot of people don't like things that I really think are beautiful.
Sure, but we're not talking
So I
about
don't-
liking and not liking.
No,
We're
but I
just
think
talking
it's
about
pretty. I think it's pretty and they don't.
But you both experience it directly without
Some of
thinking.
them don't.
Some of it. Yeah, they may not look at it at all, but if they look at it, when you look at it, there's a part of it that you sense directly, just like this wall, okay? We have a painting here. I look at this, you know, the first thing I do is I see motion. I think about a feeling, emotion. I don't think about what it is, I just feel it. Now, of course, I've been with this wall. If I didn't know it was wall, it was just an emotion, I feel it.
Oh, go ahead,
No, we look like we're taking all those pictures. Taking pictures.
Yeah, we're taking pictures, yeah.
Can I sit here?
Well, right there, you'd be right in front of the
Probably not
camera.
in front of
Is
You
it
sit
possible
there?
to sit here?
I think you're all right over there.
Yeah, I guess.
You can sit here.
Oh, no.
You can sit here.
That's fine. Sit here. Sure.
Oh, thank you. So,
Oh, you mean back to the wall?
Yeah.
That's a New York thing. So you can sit there or a feng shui thing. So you know what is coming in.
Yeah.
so when you look at Frederick Wahl or a landscape you just, it's like, boom, instantly. Or you go, wow, I hate it. But if there's a point that you instantly get a reaction. We're just talking about that category, right? We're not talking about whether you like it or whether you don't like it.
But I could also be indifferent.
You can be indifferent, but you're making the judgment instantly. That's what's important. Okay? That's what this part of this blue line is right here. And then at the other end, we have the aesthetics of thinking. The aesthetic object evokes your beauty while thinking about what it
I
expresses.
must say, for me, I'm more on that. I don't think I can separate those two things. Because when you look at that, I don't see that. That's not good enough for me to see. You understand? So I'm already making an intellectual.
Well, you didn't, so that just
Or
means
you
that
might
you
be in
didn't
the
look
middle,
at it.
or you might be in the middle somewhere.
Because basically my thought is all, I'm always sort of there, but I also know how to respond, but my responses might not be your responses.
No, of course not. There
They
won't
probably
be.
won't be.
There won't be. But you do look at things and you do
You make
get
it
things
immediate.
instantly. And then you
Like,
start
oh, I love
thinking
that.
about it.
Or
you don't.
that's enough for me.
That's enough.
It's enough for me. If I love something, I'm happy.
So let's map that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you first
So
look
what's
at
the
it.
point? Yeah.
You first look at it, you get the direct sensory experience, it comes through your senses, and you either, if you don't like it, you just drop it right there. You had that experience and that's it on that particular thing. But if you start thinking about it, then your mind goes over to here. And then if you start really getting interested in what it's saying, and you start noticing a beauty in the thinking part of it, then that forces it all the way over here. And the importance, if you say, oh, well, this part wasn't important, the direct experience wasn't important.
But it is important.
You got to think about
But
it.
it is important.
It is, especially to an artist. You got to think a little bit. This is about science and art, about the difference.
But this is a very scientific approach.
It's a tiny, and I don't think that you can do it any other way and still convey it. Maybe.
So much intelligence, so little of God's grace. Donald Barthelme. I just looked that up. It's a quote I've been using for years, and I couldn't figure out who said it. So I think obvious thing.
Say it again.
So much intelligence, so little of God's grace. And it was totally from somebody that I love Donald Barthelme. Did you ever read him at all? It's a very 60s, 70s thing. But he wrote lots of short stories and a book. You might like it. A book called Snow White. And Paul was the priest. And he's the one who said this. I thought it was some totally other kind of person. I thought it was somebody much more erudite. Although Bartholomew is not. That does not. Okay, okay, show me the other lines.
So that's
That's one line.
one line. And we look straight down, you can see the blue line, and then there's a yellow line. Okay, and then the yellow line.
I love the way this looks. I would love to see this as a set.
We talked about that, turning the whole auditorium.
I would love to see this rather than hear about it. Okay? I would love to feel this in some way instead of, see, these are all words. Words, language is a divisive force.
Right. And what we're not talking about, what we want to do is what you're talking about. But to do it, you have to know what it is first. And that's what we're talking about right now. So let's talk about this yellow line, the aesthetic. That's the problem with this computer. It's old.
It's going to the desert.
It's going to the desert, and it takes a little bit of time to pull it back up.
We have window 3 through.
Well, I can that's
Having to do, but it's so slow to put on PC.
just really working.
I use a Mac and you see it's very
I don't know, I had a Mac since the beginning. Somebody gave me one and told me I would never use a typewriter again.
Well, I put the same one in my
I had the first little baby.
Okay.
Okay.
The aesthetics of non-utility. The aesthetic object functions solely for its own use. You can't do anything with it. You can't drive it down the street. You can't open a can with it. You can't pour
But you know
wine
what?
into it.
Some people say that's what art is.
That's what
It's a useless thing. And that's, see, when I was making notes, that's what I was making notes.
Yes.
That art is useless. Science is useful because it leads to new inventions, new developments, new stuff.
There are a lot of people talking about the difference between science and art. I haven't really thought about it. But yes, what you're saying there is true. That a painting has non-utility. Whereas you come across,
Matches yourself.
yeah, but that's not what's important about it. There's not, we're talking about importance here. What's important? Now, the other end is the aesthetic of utility.
Okay, that means it could be a cup.
It could be a cup, you bet. It could be now you're talking about, yeah, big things, but it doesn't have to be big. It could be a pen.
The ergonomics of this.
Yeah, something you could do something.
Something to do with the aesthetic object functions for a purpose other than its own use. Means that the aesthetic
Well,
purpose.
and you want to know something?
Utility.
If you think about the history of civilization, I'm sure that that was always the way it used to be. That everything was useful in some way or another, even a cave painting. We don't even know what they meant, but I'm sure they meant something besides some guy painting on a wall.
Right.
You know, I'm sure they had some spiritual power to them or something to them. And so I think that art and usefulness were not separate up until maybe recently.
Right, we put them together. That's why we can't define art anymore, because we have all of these things put
We're not
together.
really. We're not really.
That's another topic. That's another topic.
But we're the culture.
We're talking about what is art. And you just said, okay, this end is art, and this end is not. A while ago, you said the same thing
I
about
don't know
this
whether
art.
that is, no, I'm not saying not. I'm not saying that's not art.
Utility?
Oh, no, I think the beautiful objects, God, the Italians understand that. They're beautiful. Everything they make is useful and beautiful.
But you're still looking at it like it's together. And what this whole circle, that's what this is
See,
about.
but that's going to be a real problem, isn't it? Because I keep trying to put the things together.
It's already together. We know that it's together.
Who's the we?
Everybody.
You know, when I used to teach, and when I taught writing,
Committed a sin.
when I taught writing, whenever somebody said, everybody knows that, I'd say, okay, how many of you knew that? And 2 people would raise their hand. Okay? Everybody does know that.
The thing of it is that everybody doesn't separate art.
Do you want this chair?
You want to make a bet?
Because you like that,
You want to go
you
around
usually
the
like,
circle?
I'll trade.
You don't have to move for me. You want to make a bet?
It's no problem.
Everybody doesn't separate
Want
art
this
and
one?
science.
Because I don't think they know what art and science is.
I know.
Well, they know what
So I
science
can go over
is,
there
and
too.
they know what
No
art
problem.
is. And they think they know what art is anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You're sounding
We
like
gotta help each other out here, you know?
I don't know. You know, I've done a lot.
You're usually here longer than me.
Yeah, go around, stand at the mall, or something, and ask people about things. And just pop out. And ask people. I'm trying to, look, I think there's something really wonderful about this, but what you're dealing with is all intellectual.
Sure. And we want to get it out of that realm. Let's talk about it.
And I didn't have nothing in
And
there.
that's what you want.
Oh, no problem.
I know, I
Just
really.
checking.
What did you lose?
Okay.
I was just checking to make.
Now, let's look
sometimes
at
I-
the last act. We have 3. Look at that. The aesthetics of mental prowess, design. The aesthetic object evokes a beauty while pondering the concept of making them. It's about your play. You designed it, and someone
Okay.
comes by and says,
Did you look at
wow.
that thing I sent you about the guy? What's his name? About how he was talking?
I was watching him paint, but
Oh, you didn't listen to what he said. Oh,
I think I
because he
did.
was talking.
But what did he- he didn't
But he
say-
was also
what did he
talking,
say?
but he talks the way a lot of artists talk, which is, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and there's a point at which I really don't know. Did you ever see that Picasso thing?
Yeah.
He's doing things and erasing it. Oh, that's not working. Oh, that's not. And they've got it through glass, so you're watching him do it. It was made maybe in the 50s or something like that. You can get it. It's like a 20, 30-minute thing of Picasso painting. And how he's, and destroying it and changing it and doing it. He didn't know what he was doing. And then he doesn't always like what he's doing, and then he has to change what he's doing, and kind of thing. But this guy is talking about how, I don't know what
I understand.
it's not a mental
I
process
understand.
about making.
You're talking about art.
You're an art.
Yeah, I'm an artist.
started
I've done
art.
it. I've done art. I've gone out and, used to paint on bodies with light, yeah.
With light.
Yeah, I'll have to shoot you a link. They're like nude bodies, and then,
Well, of course.
and then
But not just body painting. You would do
No, with light.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
That would be a very, I think we should do that as one of the,
I love that
tableaus.
idea.
yeah,
See, in other words, at this point, this is so hard for me. You can't imagine. I mean, I know I seem like I'm being counterproductive or whatever, but this is so hard for me because this is exactly the way I don't think. So what we have here is a failure to communicate. And so basically, that's the whole point. I thought of the whole deal. It's to find a way for science and arts to communicate. What I saw in that 2 minutes of that meeting, I had the feeling that everybody was a scientist. And so,
in which meeting?
in the 2 minutes
Oh,
that I
of
watched
us?
of the Patricia
Right.
House meeting.
oh, no, yeah.
Okay, I had the feeling that everybody was a scientist because they kind of, although these days artists are all educated, so everybody, those guys, Picasso, and those time artists, guys who were in Paris and weren't all guys, they didn't go to art school. They didn't get graduate degrees in art.
You ever been to the American Missionary Art Museum in Baltimore or Harvard? Wonderful country. This lady's got such a great vision. All the artists in her museum are not trained at all. They're all really rude. They have just wonderful passion. You just look at the work and it's just so passionate. I mean, it's crudely done.
But I just think that even if it wasn't crude, and some of these people were actually giving thought to what they were doing also. I think that people didn't go to graduate school to be an artist. And so now they have a way, if you look at anybody's website, of describing their process, which sounds like they're, doing it for their PhD. Okay? This is not my favorite thing, but that everybody is doing it these days. This, to me, is very distasteful. So what I'm trying to think of is something that grabs me as much as your initial description of how you got into art and science yourself, with the moving masters, or your thing. I used to paint on bodies. Oh, you didn't say it was just but I saw that. But with light.
I can see
With
it.
light. But that's such a cool idea. I mean, you don't have to get somebody completely naked to do that because people would get nervous. And you don't want to really put all of you on. You want to see. I think that as I understood the DNA of creativity, this was going to be something that was welcoming to an audience that had never given thought
It's
to
a
these
collaboration
things.
between minds like ours and minds like yours,
Who are the minds like mine?
artists.
But then where are they on YouTube?
Arthur is the one that's totally cannot get, he doesn't even see a difference between art and science.
Well, but I do.
But-
I want to tell you, I just want to tell you some thoughts that I had, because I wrote this before I even thought about the mapping thing. I just wrote whatever came to me, but I'm organized, so I write these down so I can actually read them. Okay, I thought science, this is how I thought about it. I thought about, And here's what I said. Can I, a non-scientific, non-academic, and non-visual artist, you know, I mean, I played with things, but that's not how I work with words, actually. Fit in. Can we create a performance piece together, an entertaining, non-didactic presentation
Non-didactic.
that incorporates scientific theories?
Well, that's easy.
Science creates new ways, this is what I was thinking about science and art. Creates new ways of viewing the universe, leads to new inventions and technologies. What could be the critique? It's unfeeling and academic. Art broadens our notions of what is beautiful. The critique could be useless. What is its function? What's art's function in a society? Okay?
None.
Where, how do they overlap? But it's true. And that's why we're screwed right now as a civilization. Because art should have a function in a
It should
society.
be polyaesthetic.
It should be functional. It should be important to have things that are not necessarily only utilitarian in the sense of cost.
Right.
Okay? But the utility of being an important ingredient in the development of a human.
Yeah. And what you're talking
And
about,
of a society that's worth living in.
and what you're talking about is mapped right there. It's on the non-utility side, but it's got some utility, so it's got purpose. It's closer to the middle.
Okay. Great civilization. Where, and see, but I'm always looking for where, how do the science and art overlap? And I think there are many ways. I think the eureka moments in science, you know, the mystery, what if he in fact said that in book. You know, it's interesting. Did you read that Malcolm Gladwell book, The Link? It's all about intuition, but he never uses the word intuition. You know? Anyway, the aha moment, the things that people come to scientifically, you know, that Newton or Archimedes or any of these guys, it's got nothing to do with the fact that they're mapping it out and first I do this step and this, but they've already set the groundwork for having the miracle happen.
That's right. They did the mapping
They set
first.
the groundwork for having the miracle happen. And the truth is that painters or some artists already, you know, they've spent a lot of time. Maybe they went to the museum and they tried to copy the techniques of a painting that they like. Whether they're doing that today, I don't know.
That's the science in art.
That's trying to get with, you know what that is? That's trying to get where that guy, Monet, was. So that I could get it, so I could go beyond it and do something else.
That's the science in art.
But they don't think of it that way.
No, they don't.
I lived with an artist sometime in Paris. And I was there in the times when there was still, you know, a lot of stuff there, particularly affordable. And so I was in a world of people, and they didn't sort of talk about art, but they didn't really talk about art. They talked about artists, they talked about what other people were doing, you know, they talked about what they were doing, the technique of it, you know, how to, you know what I mean? They didn't talk about art.
That's what art openings are all about.
Art openings
They
is
never look
about
at the
being
art.
seen. It's about being
Yeah,
seen
it's an narcissistic party.
and the food and the drink.
Some of it's not having a drink, it's just
Okay,
looking at the art.
this is one of the things that occurred to me. And you know what I was gonna, here's what my first question to you, besides the, what goals of the team, what kind of audience are you after? Is there even a place for me in this sort of thing, which is my original question. Can I have a list of the team members with photos and a 1 or 2 line description of each one, including not just brief CVs, but personalities, special talents, and interests, etc. Pretty Pam, a pretty esoteric title, something more welcoming. I was thinking of a chorus line. I was thinking of, because I just saw that movie the other night, the most recent chorus line, which included stuff from the beginning, putting the group in a circle and having each of them talk in the way that you were talking about the dancing movie master. You know, how did you first recognize your own beauty? You know, how did you first knew you were a creative person in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Was your family in any of that stuff? Or were you a freak in your family?
Pretty freaky, conceptually. I mean, my mother's side of the family were all artists.
Oh, okay, so then it's not like...
But they were very conservative artists, you know, landscape painters,
Landscapes.
things like that, cartoonists.
Possibly less.
Could be, but there wasn't, he just drew them, he didn't write cartoons.
Okay, so the other thing I looked up, since I stay, and I noticed Patricia mentioned that in the interview that she did,
Anything on the body.
but I don't even understand. It looks like her aura. Okay, so what did you do to make that happen?
I took a flashlight, took a camera, opened up the shutter, and I took a little handheld fluorescent, looked inside your body, and got oral level. I took another light, a green
So
one.
the process would be the most interesting thing about that. The process is the interesting. But the result is interesting, but the process that you can, I think that's very cool. I would like to see something like that, but then what does that represent?
Well, you have direct experience, and you have thinking about the process, and you
A
have,
lot of direct experience.
and you have to design.
Especially after.
When I was younger, actually, I was these two.
Not with these two.
I was older here. When I was younger, that
You were
used to be
free.
part of the,
Then you were free.
that was part of the process.
Of being an artist.
But now I'm married, and I can't.
Oh, so it wasn't really about you, it was about marriage. It was about no, it didn't start Picasso.
Transform.
She lost. And she was not a nothing.
No, she was very much.
And a ball breaker continuing to be evidently because she's over 90 now.
She's actually pure.
Well, because she also did posters.
Oh, yeah, I have, every year they give us
Okay, this is what I was thinking of, and see, I'm trying to see if there's a way I can get into this, because otherwise, you know, I'll find somebody else, you know. I looked up DNA stuff, a little bit, and I only had a little bit of time, so. And I was thinking, okay, DNA, the life process is amino acids to proteins, yeah, and something like that. So I looked up and it had initiation, elongation, translocation, termination. No, I had never seen those things before. So then I sort of followed it. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the process.
Well, I think DNA is obviously another thing.
Right, but so I was thinking of, so then I went beyond it. So I said, okay, initiation. It's like, what comes to me? So then I thought, come together, the Beatles, okay? Creative dialogue. And I looked, all I had seen at that point was the 2 minutes because I said, I can't watch this all day. That's Trisha sent me. And then you sent me the email at that time said, don't bother because in an hour we can tell you all about it, which turns out exactly. Come together. So the point at the beginning is you come together to create a dialogue, to create some kind of thing. And all talking at once, that was my image at first, that everybody talked, although that is not what you were doing at the table. You know, you were riffing off each other. But I saw that as a possibility, that everybody comes together, saying their own story at once, so that what you get is babble, what you get is, what's his name's movies, what, you know, when he did those overlapping scenes, he just died, Robert Altman, you know, when things were talking. But so you get everybody kind of talking at the same time. Doesn't even mean that you're not listening, but you're kind of talking off each other. So I was thinking, okay, that's kind of the beginning. Elongation, what does that mean to me? I don't care what it means scientifically. You know, I was just thinking, okay, that means attempts at binding and bonding, but they lead to disassembling. In fact, that's why you had fragmented. I said, you know, a bunch of girls, and they were fragmented. And you've got this one guy who is not coming together into what the rest of you are sort of hoping
Come in
for.
Arthur,
Yeah, okay? Okay, so then I was thinking, okay, so part one is this babbling together, everybody's talking at the same time, saying interesting things, but as an audience, you can't even get what they're saying, except maybe we pick out little words. But that's an interesting visual, auditory kind of thing, okay? Okay, so then elongation. Attempts at binding lead to disassembly. Stress with, and see, what I saw, which I don't think was what was happening in your discussions, except maybe with Arthur, is the differences between the artistic and scientific approaches. So what was needed is, how can we connect? How do we find a common language here? How can we communicate effectively with those who are different from us, who do not share the same points of view? Okay. So then, 3, translocation. Instead of setting up the conflict, think about the collaboration. I see science as a logical step-by-step mental process. Is that true? I mean, except for those aha moments.
That's
which
the whole
are
part,
things.
that's
Okay.
that's
I
where
see
it's at.
art as this intuitive, personal.
It's
That's not the way it's done.
a lot more,
Complicated.
try to see the work.
Oh, right. Oh, shit.
a great deal of that.
Of course.
Editing
Of
is
course.
actually what you-
Trial and error.
There's a great deal of that in there too.
But that's what's his name said, the light bulb. The Edison, is that what he said? No, now I know, you know, 100 ways of not making it
I'm
work.
thinking like those.
You know?
You said it's 1%
See, that's really-
inspiration, 10% inspiration, 90%
Perspiration.
perspiration. He's absolutely right.
Okay, but
He was
not-
more of a thinker than a logical developer. Because he was also a trainer.
Is that bad?
No. I'm
But
just
that
saying.
makes him maybe, no, it doesn't make him an engineer, because engineers are trained.
But you still have to work.
But
maybe except you, but-
But you still have to try things.
But that trial and error thing, but see, artists do the trial and error thing, but maybe not as conscious of what they're trying and erroring.
No, they're just as conscious of it, it's just that they don't have something to prove right off the bat. I mean, they're just, most artists,
That's really, wait a second, that's really interesting.
I remember a proposal was told me, don't call me an experimentalist. You never hear the experiments.
Oh, that's interesting. But that's a really interesting, they don't have something to prove. Because usually, a scientist is going to postulate something. Maybe, is that true?
a lot of times they'll have an intuitive
Yeah, but yeah,
idea.
yeah,
It's like,
hypothesis.
let's figure out, they'll have a
I mean, he's going to
hypothesis.
have a hypothesis.
You have a hypothesis.
Well, maybe an artist does,
And then you want to test
too.
it. And then you,
But it's not verbal, it's
No, it's,
verbal.
well, it's just the material.
It's here.
No, they just masturbate with the material. And hope something pops out. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, science does that a lot.
Okay, see, science does
It
that.
a lot too, you know, you say-
See, and so I'm looking for, how
But
do
at some
these
point,
things
but at some
come?
point you have to formalize it, you have to reproduce it, you can't.
Okay, but if you're an artist, at some point, you just gotta make it happen.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not working. And maybe it's not working, and maybe you throw it, that you saw that in the Picasso thing. It's not like he was doing, first of all, I'm sure he wasn't thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this video thing. There wasn't even video then. So, I'm gonna do this thing, and it's gonna be one of my greatest pieces. I'm sure he wasn't thinking that. First of all, the guy I lived with in Paris, he always said, you know, when you're that old, you're not making it, you're just doing stuff. You know, when you're creative, your creative period for an artist is the young
30.
years, is your young years, and then after that, you're just, doing whatever. Which may, in fact, be true, or may not be true, I don't know, but certainly is what they believe. But of course, he was all young. And when I'm showing you that Gerhard Richter thing, he's old. He's like 76 now, but he's been doing it for years, and maybe he's still doing it just as well as he was doing it before, and differently.
There's other things where the son, because when he's 90, his son is trying to have him declared incompetent so he can inherit his estate.
Sophocles.
Sophocles goes into court, and all he does is recite, later
By heart.
Well,
By
he was,
heart.
well, see, remember those days,
Don't say
the
figure.
poet and the composer, was the
They
same
know.
person. He just recited, I think, Oedipus and Colonna, and they declared incompetent.
that he could remember it all.
No, that he could still
But he
create.
could still create. But I am thinking about the opposite thing, that he could remember it all, because that was a world in which you didn't sit there writing everything down. So people learned how to listen with the point of reproducing something. You know, Jesus, Jesus, the thing was written down 50 years at least after he made the Sermon on the Mount. Homer, they found Troy. They found Troy by reading Homer. Homer was a blind poet who taught this thing. Imagine remembering all
Actually,
that.
some people think that probably that particular period is when literacy first became widespread, and those bards probably had
They probably had somebody writing it down,
Yeah.
a scribe.
But-
Did you ever
but-
read that?
But Homer was actually edited by Pisistratus just before
Oh,
Athens.
that's good. It's
And
good to have a good editor. We don't have them anymore.
No, and in fact, you can tell. Because there's
You can
parts
tell.
that are better than
And so
some
Thomas
parts.
Wolfe would not have a chance now, because nobody would read what he said there to what's his name, that he cut down to a book only like this, you know? And editing is important.
Actually, E. Smith talked about when she, I think it's Scholar of Hour, his editor, put it into a novel form. It's not fiction, in the 30s.
Well, there's a lot of that stuff, but there aren't
Not
editors
anymore.
like that
Not
anymore.
anymore.
There are no editors.
If it's not in
And the whole thing about blogging and stuff is wholly an edit, you know, so we have different kinds of writing now. But anyway, so I think what's very interesting to me, your references are totally Renaissance. Your references are not strictly scientific or anything. I didn't know that about self-use. I just think it's a really interesting kind of thing. To know that somebody had, you know, I mean, the references, as are yours, are quite broad.
Because I read the book about
Whatever.
whatever. No, I mean, I'm not a typical scientist. I'm not even very different. It's everything.
Well, I'm looking for the coming together. That was kind of my initial thing here. So here I'm looking, what are the differences? So my thing about the translocation, whether it has anything to do with it, all I did was take the words and riff off them in my,
Because what you're talking about is photosynthesis, not DNA at all.
yeah, well, does it matter? You don't even, the DNA of creativity
It
hasn't
does
got
if
one.
you're a scientist.
The DNA of creativity does not have one group that's doing anything with DNA.
But Tricia came up with the name DNA of
And
creativity.
you ignore it. Or you all ignore
Everybody
it.
ignored it.
Okay. But so what does it matter whether you say it or not?
I'm just
was
raising
thinking-
the point.
I was just using something
well,
using
that
a
was
metaphor.
that I could riff off.
We say we ignored it, but in a sense, Patricia put rules into what's going on so it won't be ignored. She wants this stuff documented, you know, the whole
So
creative
that's the
process.
scientific, that's the
Well,
scientific.
that's also what DNA does. DNA documents the genome.
Oh, okay.
And until DNA evolved, life probably couldn't evolve. You couldn't remember when it did. I mean, DNA is like the thing from life.
That's very funny. Have you
RNA.
said that before? Well, then why didn't I write it? You see, I'm not really, this is not how I work with community knowledge. And I don't talk so much and I listen.
Evolution was
No, what did you just say?
probably floundered. I said DNA is like the thing from life.
No, you said something.
Well, see, that's why
it.
they don't.
See, well, mark this point so you don't have to listen to the whole thing. But that was very interesting what you just said. And it's like, there's a book by a guy about the alphabet versus the body. Did you ever read it? I think it's a physician. I have it somewhere in my library.
She said DNA documents.
Before that, life couldn't go.
I mean, what is the heck? What is the life that you have to know the replication. You have to have people and unless you can remember what happened, there's no way you can progress it.
But you said it really well and so you have it down there. If you say, this is, can you see what it is? Well, anyway, whatever. So what I was thinking is, the next step was to try to assume each other's point of view, the other's point of view. I used to sometimes do writing exercises like that. If somebody wrote a story that was about some horrible, parent experience, parent fire and just torturing and whatever, that I could not understand. I said, could you write this story from the point of view of the mother? And see if you could get there. You know what I mean? And that's an interesting exercise to get to, what's the other point of view? How does the other think? How does the artist think? But you are both of those things. But what I see is this favors the science. Okay. So then I thought, okay, one amino acid added at a time at the end of a protein. Team members come together one at a time, maybe dyads, like to manage to connect, and then maybe somebody comes on to this, so it's big. So I'm looking at something that could be maybe visual. So you've got this thing at the beginning, and then you've got the disassociation, and then you've got the attempts to connect, and then the termination is combining creative energies and approaches to produce a collaborative work of art, a performance art. Now, I think that something of this could be very juicy if it's really three-dimensional and you make a set of it. And you could do that thing and have each of these things illustrated by something. But I need to see a story. And within this, I don't see story. Okay? I see points. But they're intellectual points, so I don't see, and what you need is story. And I thought that the issue of this is, how do we work? Well, first of all, that's how you find out. How do you work creatively as a group? How do you get a group to produce a work of art together? The work of art being a performance project, which is what you had in mind. This is not yet the performance.
This is the science. We're talking about putting science and art together.
Where's the art?
That's where, we've got the science, now we need the art, but we need to put the science with the art.
Right. So you're at step one now. This is step one, which is where is the art?
First of all, it sounds like we're just going to shit can this.
No, I'm not thinking. I'm just giving you my response to where is the art. I had thought that there were going to be artists and scientists bringing their disparate points of view in, but what I'm seeing so far is the science.
Science about art and about science.
Okay,
it's about all of this.
What we is having a series of nano acid that one. You extend the audience and then evaluate and categorize.
When you had something about interactive,
Interactive.
Yeah, we were going to first of all set the auditorium up as this, and I'm thinking the easiest way to do it is do anything with one. I'm thinking helium balloon, create an axis, helium balloons this way down the aisle, across the side of the auditorium this way to get that axis, and then our string of balloons up and down for the three axes. Now we have LECO projecting the aesthetics of direct sensory experience, the aesthetics of thinking, the aesthetics of non-utility, the aesthetics of utility, and so we have the projection, so you've always got these things, the references.
See, I love that. I love the way that looks.
And now that we need to using your smartphone, you can dial into the internet, with your phone, and we have a website already set up so that you can vote, and we say, okay, you do a skit, and then say, okay, these are the questions you need to ask. Was this skit more importantly about requiring physical interaction?
Okay, so that's less interesting to me than what you were doing originally when you were standing around here and doing this for me, which is, where am I doing this person? You know, how am I getting warmer? Am I getting colder? I don't care about how bad that is. This is not those reality shows where you decide who's going to get kicked off. It's like, it could be, where am I in this?
Well, that's really,
Each
but
audience
that's,
member, where am I in?
where does this skip now?
Okay, but here's my problem. Okay, my problem is, you have this whole wonderful thing, but I think,
Are you thinking about
where's the story?
the skit
Where's
moving
the
through the
story?
space and changing
No,
in the
I'm
space?
saying that after they watch whatever it is, because what's missing here is what anything is going to be about is the performance.
That's right.
Okay, the performance is missing in this performance project. The idea of what the performance is completely missing. What you have is the justification for the theory behind the whole thing, but you're missing what I could write about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay? Okay, so what I'm saying is, but I also get your picture of the auditorium, I love that. But then I want what you were doing, not you're voting on whether this is better for this and more for that.
It's not better, it's
But,
just
and
where-
not
where-
better, but like more this and
categorizing
more
it.
that. I don't care. I care about categorization. How am I moving? You know, am I something? In other words, that whatever question you have is what you were doing when you were doing it. You know, am I more tired, or am I more effervescent, or whatever those things were that you were saying before.
Hot or cold, sweet or sour,
Like that,
higher,
like that. So that you have